I thought I was just catching a late ride after another long day at the office. I thought my boss was just being polite, the way good leaders are when the parking lot is dark and the rain has started to come down in thin silver strings. I didn't expect to see what I saw on his passenger seat. I didn't expect a gift that would touch a part of me I'd kept quiet for years and make me rethink what strength, kindness, and respect can look like between two people who choose to treat each other well. Before I begin, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. What city? What town? What little dot on the map you call home? I'd always love picturing your streets and your diners and those porch lights that glow like small planets when the sun finally gives up for the night. It was a Tuesday, the kind of Tuesday that eats your hours in handfuls. By the time the office emptied, the printers had fallen silent, and the cleaning crew had started their soft ballet with carts and dusters. I shut down my computer, rubbed my eyes, and stared out through the big glass at the water beating on the hoods of the cars, mine not among them. My old sedan, faithful to a fault, had gasped its last breath in my driveway the day before. The mechanic said the fix cost more than the car, and I'd smiled the way you do when your wallet tries to pretend it isn't empty. That's when Joseph stepped out of his office, jacket over his arm, tie loosened just enough to look human. He's not loud. That's the first thing most people notice. He has this measured way of speaking, like he's remembering to leave room for your words, too. Over the years, he's earned a reputation you don't see much anymore. For, without being cruel, generous without making a speech about it. He paused by my desk and tipped his head toward the glass doors. Still raining, he said. It's trying to convince us to start over tomorrow, I replied, grabbing my bag. I'm just figuring out my ride. I know your car's in the shop, he said. Let me drive you. I have to pass your street anyway. I hesitated. I'm 48 and I've learned the price of favors when they come with receipts. But this wasn't a backroom favor, and we both knew it. It was logistics on a wet night, nothing more. And still, I could hear my mother's old voice in my head, the one that says, "Be careful what doors you open, Jessica. Not everything on the other side is for you." "Thank you," I said finally. "If you don't mind." "You'll keep me honest about the route," he smiled. "You know those back roads better than I do." We walked through the lobby, the floor polished to the brightness of a lake at dusk. Outside, the rain had softened to a mist that caught the light like breath. The parking lot smelled like wet asphalt and the hint of someone's cologne from hours earlier. He pressed the unlock button and the car lights blinked, an older sedan, midnight blue, the kind of car that doesn't beg for attention but rewards the people who pay it. He opened the passenger door before I could reach for it. That should have been ordinary, but it wasn't. There was something on the seat. A long, shallow bundle wrapped in brown paper and tied with twine, darkened here and there where the rain had freckled it. My name was written on top in careful ink, Jessica. For a moment, I didn't touch it. Something in me rolled back the years with a sound like old film. A garage, 12 years old, my father's hands showing me how to cradle a wrench like it had secrets to tell if you held it right. The citrus-scented soap he'd scrub his fingers with until the creases gave up their black half-moons. The way he'd say, "Listen to the engine, kiddo. It'll tell you what it needs if you listen more than you look." "Go ahead," Joseph said, stepping back as if to give the moment space. "It's for you." The rain ticked on the roof. The interior smelled faintly of leather and some stubborn undertone of cedar that reminded me of my grandmother's hope chest. I slid into the seat and lifted the bundle, surprised by its weight. The paper rasped softly as I peeled it back. Inside was an old, beautifully restored leather roll, the kind that unspools like a story. I loosened the strap and spread it open across my lap. Tools. Not hardware store bright, not the kind that look good hanging on a pegboard in a staged photo. These were tools with miles on them. Wrenches whose chrome felt like a second skin, a screwdriver with a wooden handle burnished to silk, a small socket set whose teeth were sharp and honest. Along the edge of the leather, in small blind stamped letters, someone had pressed 2 initials. My breath stopped. My father's initials. Not my married name, not even mine, but the name I had before I grew up and changed it. M's, he kept a set just like this, until the fire in the back corner of the shop that ate the pegboard and left the metal hot enough to bite. This wasn't that set. I knew that, but it echoed so precisely that my throat closed. I ran a finger along the stitching, flat and tight, as if someone had held their breath while bringing it back to life. Joseph, I said, but my voice came out smaller than I intended. How did you? Why? You told me a story once, he said, leaning on the doorframe so he wouldn't loom. About learning to listen to engines with your dad. About that tool roll. I saw one at a little place upstate, thought of you, and asked a restorer friend to bring it back the way it should be. If you want it. If it would bring you more comfort than ache. I looked at him. The parking lot lights made tiny galaxies in the water on his shoulders. There was no sales pitch in his face. No ledger, no tally. Just that steady, present way he has. The kind of attentiveness you can't fake because people feel it in their bones when you try. It's too much, I said, because reflex is a strong animal. It's just a thing, he replied. Useful things should live with people who will use them. And he reached into the glove compartment and pulled out a folded slip of paper. There's a note for Lenny at Westfield Tire. He's expecting you. I prepared for the diagnostic and the first round of work. He's honest. I've known him for 20 years. But I want you to tell him what you think before he touches a bolt. There it was, that line where help becomes humiliation. I felt myself bristle on instinct. Before I could pull away, he said very quietly, no strings. If you don't want any of this, say the word and I'll take it back. I won't be offended. I won't ask again. I thought of your father, and I thought of your car, and I thought maybe it would be good to put tools back in your hands, even if they're just a reminder of who taught you to be steady. The rain, having said its piece, softened into silence. I held the screwdriver and felt the ghost of those old Saturdays, me on a milk crate, my father whistling, the world smaller but somehow bigger because we believed we could fix it with time and patience and the right socket size. I'm not a crier, not at commercials, not at sentimental songs, but something about the weight of that unexpected kindness unlatched a window I'd kept painted shut. My eyes filled, hot and embarrassing, and I looked away, focusing on the stitch line until it steadied. Thank you, I said, and I meant it with a depth that startled me. Don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything, he answered. We should get you home before the streets gloss over. Buckle up. We eased out of the lot. The wipers traced patient arcs, and the radio hummed a low station where some older singer still believed in melody. The city did that after-hours trick of looking like itself and a stranger at the same time. Laundromats glowing, a couple arguing softly beneath an umbrella, taillights painting red commas across the lanes. I laid my hand on the leather roll as if it might bolt for the door. I could feel my father laughing at me, or maybe with me, at this expensive tenderness that would have made him gruff and shy. Tell me if you want quiet, Joseph said, hands at 10 and 2, eyes on the road. I don't mind letting the car do the talking. I'm all right, I said. It's been a year. I surprised myself by saying it out loud. The divorce, the money, the car, My son moving 2 states away like I raised him to fly, and then had the nerve to be surprised when he did. He nodded once, slow. I know the shape of that year, he said. Different details. Same weight. We passed the diner on Willow, the one that still serves coffee in thick white mugs that burn your palms if you're not careful. A trucker with a beard like a winter forest sat alone by the window. The neon sign buzzed, flickered, held. I felt the old ache of wanting someone to anchor the evening with a conversation that ran out only when the pie did. You remember everything people say, I told him. Even the little pieces they throw away in the margins. That's rare. I remember the important things, he said simply. And sometimes the important things are the small things. He didn't press. He didn't pivot the conversation back to himself. He didn't extract. That sort of restraint looks boring from the outside. From the inside, when you're tired and you've been watched for years by eyes that only half see you, it feels like a porch light left on for you even when you're late. At a long red light we didn't need, he glanced at the roll. Your dad would have taught you on that screwdriver, he said. You hold it like a pencil, not a hammer. I laughed then, the real kind that sneaks up and makes you younger for 6 seconds. How do you know that? Because my old man taught me on the same one, he said. He wasn't a mechanic. He was a teacher. But he believed in keeping a house that could outlast a storm. We drove the rest of the way with that warmth sitting between us like a third passenger who didn't need a seatbelt. When we turned onto my street, the oaks leaned over us, heavy with rain. He pulled in front of my place and killed the engine. The quiet that follows the click of cooling metal always startles me. It's like a stagehand returning the world to normal after a scene change. I can carry it up, he offered, nodding at the tools. I've got it. I folded the leather carefully, tucked the strap then, because the moment deserved it. I met his eyes. There was no tug-of-war there. No expectation. Just a man who had chosen to be decent because it's cheaper than regret. Why me? I asked, softer than I meant to. You have 100 people you're responsible for. Why remember my story? He looked out through the wet windshield where the streetlight made everything look like a memory already. Because you show up, he said. On the good days and especially the bad ones, you steady the room. That has a cost. Sometimes the right thing is to pay a little of it back, not with speeches, with something that makes sense in a hand. I sat with that for a second. In the reflection, I saw a different version of myself than the one who trudged through the rain an hour before, a woman who still knew how to listen to an engine and to her own heart if she gave it half a chance. I opened the door and the night air came in, cool and clean as a new page. Good night, Joseph, I said, stepping out. Thank you. For the ride. For the rest. He nodded once. Good night, Jessica. Text me when you're inside. I walked up the path, the pebbles popping under my shoes like old popcorn, and let myself in. From the doorway, I waved back and lifted the leather roll the way you'd lift a bottle you're toasting with. He gave a 2-finger salute and eased the car away from the curb, the taillights reddening the wet street and then turning the corner out of sight. Inside, the house hummed with the kind of emptiness that isn't sad so much as unused. I set the tools on the kitchen table, ran my fingertips over each piece like I was taking attendance, and then just stood there, listening to the rain retreat and the quiet come on like a familiar song you haven't heard in too long. There are gifts that fix something you can point to, and there are gifts that fix the hinge on a door you didn't know you could open again. I didn't sleep easily, but I slept honestly. When I woke just before dawn, the world was rinsed and ready. I made coffee and laid the roll out once more, the initials steady, the leather warm from the radiator's breath. I thought of the shop, the suit, my father's hands, my own stubbornness. I thought of a boss who didn't push past a boundary he could have pretended not to see. I thought of roads and engines and the soft song of wipers giving rhythm to the kind of conversation you only have when you trust someone not to use your words against you later. There was more to say to him, more to decide, more to ask of myself. But for now, there was the sound of a city yawning itself awake, and a set of tools reminding me that some of the best repairs aren't flashy. They're patient. They're quiet. They tighten something just enough that the rattling stops, and you realize you can hear your own thoughts again. The next morning the rain had dried, but its memory still clung to the air, heavy and cool. I woke early, restless from the night before. The leather tool roll sat on my kitchen table where I had left it, the initials glinting faintly in the slant of morning light. For a moment I just stared at it, coffee cooling in my hand, as though it might vanish if I looked away. Some gifts are like that. They feel too precise, too right, and you don't trust the world enough to let them stay. I kept hearing Joseph's voice, calm and steady, the way he said, "No strings." It wasn't the words alone, but how he said them, like he knew the walls I had built around myself and had no intention of breaking them down, just leaving a door unlocked in case I wanted to step through. At work, the office buzzed with its usual rhythm. Phones ringing, printers coughing, people trading weekend plans even though it was only Wednesday. Joseph moved through it with his usual quiet presence. No one would guess he had been the reason I went to bed with tears in my eyes, or that he had pressed an old story of mine back into my hands. He didn't even look my way until late afternoon, when I stopped by his office to drop off a report. He thanked me, brief and professional, and then added in a lower voice, "How did the tools feel in your hands?" It caught me. Not many people ask questions that small, that personal, especially in a workplace where everyone wears masks of competence. Like they remembered me, I said, surprising myself with the honesty. He nodded once, satisfied, and went back to his papers as though I had just told him the weather report. No drama, no wait, just acknowledgement. That evening, I drove home in my own car. Lenny had worked fast, the way Joseph promised, and when I turned the ignition, the engine hummed like an old friend. I laid my hand on the wheel and thought of how many times I had cursed this machine for betraying me, when really it had only asked for care I had been too worn down to give. Funny how that happens with more than just cars. By Friday, something had shifted. I could feel it in the way I carried myself, lighter somehow, like I'd remembered an older version of Jessica who hadn't been erased by bills, by heartbreak, by the long grind of starting over at nearly 50. That evening, when the office began to thin out, Joseph paused at my desk again. "You've got a ride now," he said with a small smile. "But I was wondering if you'd let me buy you a cup of coffee. There's a diner near the highway that makes pie you can actually taste." I hesitated. The old warning voice stirred, the one that always kept me on the safe side of any line. But then I remembered his quiet restraint, his refusal to demand anything from me, and the way he had carried that tool roll like it was a simple kindness and not a rescue. I nodded. Coffee sounds good. The diner was bright with neon, the kind that hums just above your head and turns the night outside into a black curtain. We sat in a booth with cracked red vinyl seats, the kind that hold 1,000 forgotten conversations. The waitress poured coffee without asking, and Joseph ordered cherry pie like he had been doing it his whole life. When the plates arrived, the smell of sugar and pastry filled the air, and for the first time in years, I felt like I was sitting in a place where nothing bad could follow me. We didn't talk about work. We didn't talk about obligations. He asked me about my father, what he had been like outside the garage, what stories he used to tell. I found myself sharing details I hadn't said out loud in years, The way my father whistled through his teeth when he was happy. The way he carried peppermints in his pocket for me. And Joseph listened, really listened, leaning back in that patient way of his, letting the silence stretch when it needed to, never hurrying me to the next sentence. When it was his turn, he told me about his father, the teacher who believed in fixing things with your own hands, not because you couldn't afford new, but because it taught you patience and care. His words folded over mine like two sides of the same cloth, and for a moment I could see how life sometimes braids stories together without asking permission. The night ended the way all good things should, without fanfare. He drove me back, waited until I was inside, and left with a simple good night. No pushing, no promises, just a space left open. Lying in bed, I thought about how rare it is, at my age, to feel seen without being judged, to be remembered without being used. Joseph's gift hadn't just been tools or even the kindness of fixing my car. It was something more subtle, an invitation to remember who I had been and who I could still be. And as the house settled into its quiet hum, I realized something. Sometimes the most unexpected gift isn't the one wrapped in brown paper, but the reminder that your story isn't finished yet. That even at 48, you can still be surprised. You can still begin again.